Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammang sanghang namasami. Dear friends, today, as we are approaching the beginning of the 3-month Vasa retreat, where the monastics stay in one place for 3 months, we've been discussing about making an adhitthana, or a resolution, something that one might determine to do for the 3 months to strengthen one's practice. It's interesting, in speaking to people, it seems like many of the resolutions or the adhitthanas that I've heard of are rooted in dukkha, in these basic, deeply embedded aspects of our personality that still are difficult to get out of and keep coming back again and again. How to unwind those karmic knots. I thought of today's sutta, the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta, or the Exposition of the Elements, number 140 in the Middle Length Discourses, because in this sutta, the Buddha speaks of 4 resolutions which are completely different. Rather than being rooted in dukkha, these 4 resolutions are rooted in nibbana, in our highest aspiration. A very distinctive way of seeing the qualities of our highest aspiration, our highest goal. This is a big sutta, and without delay, I'm going to go over it while inviting you to look at an outline that I typed up a few minutes ago. This sutta begins with this is a very unusual sutta. I've not come across anything like it elsewhere in the teachings. The framing story is regarding a clansman whose name is Pukusati, who came from a faraway land, had gone forth into homelessness out of faith in the Blessed One. So he heard of the teachings of the Buddha, but he never met the Buddha and never saw the Buddha. He had come to the Middle Country wanting to find the Buddha in order to become a disciple. So this a person named Pukusati is staying in a potter's workshop. This would be the tradition of hospitality, that every village would have a place where wanderers or visitors could stop and spend the night. The Buddha also was wandering. This is very unusual. The Buddha is wandering alone. Normally he's followed by a retinue of his disciples. But in this case, it's part of the tale that he's alone. He also wants to stay that night in that workshop. And he approaches and speaks to Pukusati and says, if it's not inconvenient, Bhikkhu, I'll stay one night in the workshop. And Pukusati sort of says, well, this workshop is large enough, friend. Let the Venerable stay as long as he likes. So they sat down. They both sat in meditation with their bodies upright. and sat throughout most of the night, seated in meditation. Both Pukusati and the Buddha, both practicing meditation through the night. The Buddha thought, this clansman conducts himself in a good way. Suppose I question him. And he says, under whom have you gone forth? Who's your teacher? And Pukusati answers, friend, there's a recluse called Gotama, the son of the Sakyans, who went forth from the Sakyan clan. He is accomplished, fully enlightened, perfect in true knowledge and conduct, sublime, knower of the worlds, incomparable teacher of persons to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, enlightened and blessed. I've gone forth under that blessed one. That blessed one is my teacher. And the Buddha says, so where is that blessed one, accomplished and enlightened? Where is he now living? Pukusati answers, there is, friend, the country called Savatthi. The blessed one is there. Buddha says, Bhikkhu, have you ever seen the blessed one before? Would you recognize him if you saw him? Pukusati says, no, I've never seen the blessed one. I would not recognize him if I saw him. And now the Buddha realizes Pukusati has gone forth from the home life out of faith. So suppose I teach him. And now he starts this teaching, says, now Pukusati does not know who he's listening to. That's what's creating the dramatic tension in this story. The Buddha begins his teaching. It says, Bhikkhu, a person consists of 6 elements, 6 fields of contact, 18 mental preoccupations, and he has 4 foundations, or you could say 4 resolutions, 4 determinations. The tides of conceiving do not sweep over one who stands upon these 4 resolutions. When the tides of conceiving no longer sweep over him, he's called a sage at peace. And then in the introduction, he mentions the 4 resolutions. One should not neglect wisdom, one should preserve truth, should cultivate relinquishment, and should train for peace. So this is the summary of his exposition. Now, the argument here seems to circle around, and I've given you the outline so you can start to track it. He starts with explaining the 6 elements: earth, water, fire, air, space, and consciousness. This is referring to the qualities of earthiness, which is hard, or has a hard or soft. Water, something wet and also sticky. So if you add water to dust, it becomes mud. So water has that sticky quality and a flowing quality. Fire has the quality of temperature, hot or cold. Air has the quality of space and has the quality of movement. So the air element is like the wind element. So what makes the body, like when I'm moving my hand or moving my body, the movement in the body is manifesting the air element. And then the space is the space which is the emptiness within any boundary. And then a consciousness element, the knowing faculty. So he just introduces them. Then he introduces the 6 fields of contact. Eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. In our discussion this morning, I was emphasizing to you that outside of the contact with these 6 fields, there's nothing that we can experience. the entirety of everything we can experience is within that. And so if we're seeking for wisdom, we have to find it. We have to develop wisdom within this. So this is all we have. So there's not some other reality apart from the fields of contact where we could go to and find wisdom or find liberation. Now, the 18 mental preoccupations could say 18 kinds of mental exploration. These are where we're starting to get into understanding the nature of dukkha. The Buddha said, a person becomes preoccupied with a sight that's the basis for happiness, or sadness, or equanimity. The word for preoccupied is upavicharati. So those who studied the Satipatthana may be familiar with vitaka vichara, applied thought or sustained thought. And that sustained thought is supposed to remain in connection with the object. And then the upa it's up to, so it's a stronger form of sustained thought. So then this is referring to when we become externally focused on objects, and we have lost track of having the mindfulness turned backward to be aware of our own internal process. So we lose mindfulness about our own process because the mind is all over everything. Even if you've taken, let's say you're worried about the health of your body and become preoccupied and obsessed with the health of the body, even then you've still lost your mindfulness, even though the health of the body is part of this body, but it's not the same thing as being mindful. It's like making the body into an external thing and getting lost in those thoughts. So then for each of the six senses, and that's including the mind, that would be the awareness of thoughts that come to the mind being preoccupied with thoughts or by any of these other ones. And then thinking the kind of thoughts that are the basis for happiness, we become obsessed with that. Or thinking the kind of thoughts that are the basis for sadness, preoccupied with that. Or the kind of thoughts basis for equanimity, preoccupied with that. So this is one way of describing how dukkha operates, by the mind becoming lost in that way. Then he comes back and repeats the four resolutions. Do not neglect wisdom, preserve the truth, foster generosity, or you could say foster relinquishment, and train only for peace. So these are the four resolutions. And you'll see that the wisdom practice is culminating in nibbana, which is the highest wisdom. And then the truth, relinquishment, and peace are the characteristics of nibbana. So those second, third, and fourth resolution are the natural manifestation of one who is enlightened. So how can we not neglect wisdom? Now, for those who spoke this morning, and were speaking about the challenge of taking our deeply ingrained bad habits and how to make a resolution to get rid of the bad habits for this period of the Vasa. This, what the Buddha is talking about, would be a very good general method for overcoming these bad habits. The first is, he begins with the contemplation of the 5 elements. I'm keeping this is the, in many lists you see the 4 great elements, which is the earth, water, fire, air, and then the 5th element is space. And then in this list, the 6th element is consciousness. But first he says, take the first 5 and contemplate them internally and externally. So the interior earth element is anything inside your own individual body, including head hairs, body hairs, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinews, bones, bone marrow, kidneys, heart, liver, diaphragm, spleens, lung, intestines, undigested food, feces, or anything else hard and solid and appropriated to you as being part of your body that's internal, pertaining to the individual. That's called the interior earth element. So they have the quality both hardness and stiffness like bones, and also a soft and yielding quality like fat is sort of soft. So softness and hardness both are qualities of the earth element. And then the exterior, then you consider that these elements are just elements. They should be seen with the right understanding like this. This is not mine. I am not this. This is not myself. So not identifying with the fat on your body, not identifying with the undigested food in your belly or with the feces that are accumulating in your large intestine. Not identifying with the bones or with the skull or with any material part of the body. And then looking outside at everything in the whole world which has got that quality of earthiness. So it could be the hardness of a tree or the hardness of stones, the hardness of the mountain, or it could be the softness of the leaves, the softness of grass, the softness of the soft things in the world. And then bringing the contemplation inside and outside. So the hardness of the teeth and the hardness of a pebble is just hardness. The softness of the fat in your body and the softness of grass or the softness of a flower is just softness. Bringing the awareness back and forth until your sense of ownership in the earth element breaks up. You truly see with right understanding, it says reject the earth element. It's nimbindati, it's you become disenchanted, disillusioned, or disappointed with the earth element and detach the mind from the earth element. So this is a basic practice, and this will, whatever your particular bad habits that you want to break are, if you do this contemplation, this detachment will generalize, and you can detach from all of your other patterns. So then, the same thing with the water element. What's inside the body is bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, saliva, snot, synovial fluid, and urine, or anything else in the body that's wet. And then the exterior earth element is anything outside that's wet. So it could be the water in the creek or in the river, or the water in the spring, or it could be the cup of tea or the cup of water that you're about to drink. And so the wetness of the water and the wetness of urine is just wetness. So you get beyond attachment, liking the water and disliking the urine. You consider both of them, the wetness, the wateriness of them, not me, not mine, not myself, become disenchanted with that. Then the fire element, the interior fire element, includes whatever there is about your body which warms, and that which ages, that which heats you up when feverish. The heat in the body that causes the food and drink to be digested. And it's the same thing, it's the heat in the body that causes the beautiful young body that one used to have as a baby to gradually get older and older and to become worn out. That's the fire element. And then you look outside, whether it be the sun or be a fire or anything outside that's warm, and see that as the fire element. Do that same contemplation, not me, not mine, not myself. With the air element, they are particularly referring to what's airy inside the body, and the winds that go up or down, the winds in the belly and the bowels, the winds that flow through the limbs, in-breath and out-breath, anything else that's airy and appropriated to the individual. That's the internal air element pertaining to the individual. And then the external is the wind outside. Same contemplation. And then the space element, interior, anything that's spacious or space pertaining to an individual. He mentions the ear canals, the nostrils, the mouth, the space for swallowing what is eaten or drunk, the space where the food stays while it's being digested, the space where it accumulates before being excreted from the nether regions. Those are all the spaces inside the body. We can see when we look in detail at the body in this way, already taking such a clinical look at it, we become disenchanted with the human body.
Excuse me.
Yes.
What you're talking about is not jibing with this the thing that's on the screen.
Oh, sorry. I'm here. I'm still right here, becoming disillusioned with each element. So what's summarized on the screen in just these 2 lines is everything that I've spoken about so far.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you had a whole other sheet or something you were.
Yep. No, that's.
Yeah, I was confused also.
Yeah,
okay.
it sounded like you had a separate, you're
Thank
going.
you. I intended when I planned on doing this to highlight the topic because it is easy to get lost, and I wanted the outline to sort of show where you're at. When all of these elements are contemplated in this way, then he says only consciousness remains, which is purified and bright. So this is kind of the culmination of the contemplation of the elements. And then with this consciousness, what does the consciousness know? The consciousness knows pleasure, pain, and neutral. So, like in the 4 foundations, first you got the body, And then you've got the Vedana, or the feeling, the pleasure, pain, neutral. So, and this also, back up at the top when we talked about how dukkha is happening with these 18 obsessions, those obsessions are coming out of this feeling aspect of pleasure, pain, neutral. That's the basis that the mind starts to be obsessed. But in this case, when we know pleasure, pain, neutral, we have this new possibility of knowing the cessation of that feeling based on the cessation of contact. So now one is studying impermanence. When something is sensed, which is pleasant, something to be experienced as pleasant is sensed, like a beautiful person or a beautiful scenery. They know it as a pleasant, they know the pleasant feeling. And then when that contact comes to its end, the corresponding feeling ceases and stops. So that beautiful person or that beautiful scenery is gone, and the feeling, the pleasure of watching them is gone. So we see the impermanence of these contacts and the impermanence of the feeling.
May I?
Yes, okay, Damon.
Yeah, but that doesn't account for memory, pleasant memories that people cherish. And
Okay, so when you remember something pleasant, you've got that pleasant feeling. And when you stop remembering that pleasant thing, you stop having that pleasant feeling.
okay, well,
Right?
it that pleasant feeling can get you a long way in life. I'm sorry, the pleasant memory. Some people base their whole life on that.
So some people, this is where, when we talked before about the obsession, the mental preoccupation, if a person is continuously stirring up and relishing and chewing on their pleasant memories, they're cultivating a mental preoccupation. But if they have been doing this contemplation of the elements as being not me, not mine, then they are giving up this clinging and relishing. And so then they're no longer like divorced from experiencing what's happening right now because they're remembering something that happened before. They're able to be constantly letting go in order to be present for the next thing. That's excellent questions. I appreciate that. And there's a comment from Patipada. Maybe she'll come in and explain it at some point. So they know that with the cessation of that contact, whether it be something with something that's actually present to the five senses, or something that's in a memory or imagination coming up to the mental sense, they see that the pleasure ceases, or if it was a painful thing, they see that the pain, when the contact stops, the pain stops. The painful feeling ceases and stops. The neutral feeling arises dependent on contact with an object that's neutral for you. And then when the contact stops, that neutral feeling stops. So this is a second contemplation that's part of this ladder going towards wisdom. After becoming capable of letting go of obsessions and experiencing the cessation of these contacts, then, he says, only equanimity remains, pure, bright, pliable, workable, and radiant. And this is this equanimity is a culmination of many different practices, like in the Brahma Viharas, the highest of the, after loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, comes equanimity. In the 7 factors of awakening, equanimity is the culmination. So the equanimity is its evenly overlooking quality, which is able to be present for whatever is arising without being moved. So it's still got that quality of inner stillness or inner stability. I know when I used to attend the Thich Nhat Hanh retreats, one of the chanting that he gives about breathing is being solid as a mountain. That's the equanimity. So even if it's thunder and lightning and wind, the mountain just sits there. It's so large. It's able to withstand anything, and it just sits there. It's like when a deft goldsmith or a goldsmith's apprentice prepares the forge, fires the crucible, picks up some gold with the tongs, puts it in the crucible. From time to time, they fan it. From time to time, they sprinkle water on it. From time to time, they just watch over it. That gold becomes pliant, workable, and radiant, not brittle. It's ready to be worked. Then that goldsmith can successfully create any kind of ornament they want, whether a bracelet, earrings, a necklace, or a golden garland. So that metaphor is describing the process of meditation, where in our formal cushion practice, as well as being mindful throughout the day, we're aware of any arising of the hindrances or defilements, and then by watching, by becoming disenchanted, by at least developing the equanimity, that the wisdom that's saying, this is not me, not mine, not myself, then we start to become disillusioned, and so we're not hanging on and self-justifying with trying to keep a hold of the hindrances. Instead, we're willing to let them go. And then by observing the impermanence and getting our minds tuned in to be able to see the cessation, the impermanence of various experiences when they become over, then all of those things are part of that purification and processing of the mind to cause the mind to become pliable, workable, and radiant. You could, in a way, compare this process to descriptions elsewhere about the jhana meditation, which I won't get into, but the next part of this sutta goes into the immaterial meditations. So that equanimity can be directed. So rather than directing the mind to be in touch with the sensations in the body, or being in touch with some aspect of the body, you let the material body drop away, and all that's left is space. And then you can do the contemplation of space. So at that point, you would have just the consciousness, and the object of consciousness is space. Okay? Then one could, well, for each one of these, it goes through the subsequent thought, which is understanding how even this very peaceful meditation, which is withdrawn from the 5 senses and is just consciousness and infinite space, that that meditation procedure, the mind is still conditioned. It's conditioned by how it was applied. So you chose to apply it to infinite space. That's a conditioning. As long as I apply it to the infinite space, the mind will develop accordingly. And if I grasp onto that dimension, then upon the end of this life, I could be reborn in the realm of infinite space, and I could remain there for a very long time, which is explained in the commentary as being some number of thousands of eons. So 64,000 eons, you could stay in the dimension of infinite space until you used up that karma and then came back to some other realm of rebirth. If you then forget about the object of infinite space, then the only thing you have left is consciousness. One can dwell on contemplation of infinite consciousness. Then if you forget about consciousness, you could dwell on the perception of nothingness. So there's no space, no conscious, no nothing. And then the final development on this list is a dimension of neither perception nor non-perception, which is the last of the four immaterial meditations. But in every case, what the Buddha is saying, if this equanimity is relying on that equanimous object, so you could say infinite space, infinite consciousness, these are very equanimous objects because they're so peaceful. But if you're relying on that, depending on that, you've not reached the goal, you've not yet come to wisdom. And then when you come to that recognition, then comes this understanding. You understand that the mind is conditioned. And based on that, you give up making any choice or forming any intention to continue your existence or to come to an end of existence. So these are the different planes of existence, different planes of becoming. You've done this whole practice. It's a practice of developing, disidentifying, and becoming disillusioned, rejecting any kind of clinging or attraction or attachment. So understanding how the mind is conditioned by how it is applied, whether it's applied to one of these objects, then one makes no choice, forms no intention about existence. Now, one is not grasping at anything in the world. Based on not grasping, there is no anxiety. Based on not being anxious, one personally becomes extinguished. That's Nibbana. So this is the wisdom. This is the culmination of of the development of wisdom. Every feeling is now understood as impermanent, with no attachment, no relishing, as detached. And when you come to the very end of your life, with the last breath, with the end of the last breath, you feel the end of this body approaching. And you know that everything that's felt will become cool right here. When you come to the very end of this life, and you feel the approach of the last moment of this life, you know everything that's felt would be cool right here. And then you have the knowledge of the ending of suffering. And then you are endowed with the ultimate wisdom. So this is the wisdom to be cultivated, is the knowledge of the ending of suffering. This is the purpose of our practice. And if you would like to get there, one idea is you should follow the steps and procedures that the Buddha is suggesting here. So if you want to be here, start with contemplating the elements. Start with becoming aware of the senses, of the sense bases. Now then, the last three are happening very quickly. There's not a long description, but it's very deep. Before that, the ending of suffering, it's got the metaphor of the oil and the wick. When the oil and wick are used up, it's extinguished because of the lack of fuel. So that's what you're experiencing there. Then they have freedom, an unshakable freedom, which is founded on the truth. That which is false has a deceptive nature. That which is true, deceptive nature, namely extinguishment or nibbana. Therefore, a mendicant thus endowed is endowed with the ultimate resolve of truth. So when we hear about the fetters, which are the ones that are cut off one by one as we approach awakening, the last fetter is the fetter of ignorance. And it's when we know the end of suffering that the fetter of ignorance is destroyed. And we have that nibbana, which has the undeceptive nature. Then, cultivating relinquishment and practicing for peace. These two are, in a way, like a comparison of an unenlightened person with an enlightened person. It says, when they were ignorant, they used to acquire attachments. And the attachments is anything that one takes on as being me, mine, or myself. Anything that's related to identity. The attachments have now been cut off at the root, made like a palm stub, obliterated so they're unable to arise again in the future. And therefore, one is endowed with this relinquishment, the letting go of all attachments. And then the fourth resolution, practicing for peace. This is looking at it from the realm of greed and hatred. When ignorant, they used to be covetous, full of desire and lust. But that has now been cut off at the root, made like a palm stump, obliterated so it's unable to rise again. Or else, In their ignorance, they used to be contemptuous, full of ill will and malevolence. But that also has been cut off at the root, made like a palm stump, obliterated. Or when they were ignorant, they used to be full of delusion. That's been cut off, made like a palm stump, unable to arise in the future. Then, when the bhikkhu is endowed with this pacification of greed, hatred, and delusion, they're endowed with the ultimate foundation of peace. And this is the summary of the 4 adhitanas, or the 4 resolutions, which are not to neglect wisdom, to preserve the truth, to foster relinquishment, and to train only for peace. That's what I said, and that's why I said it. When they stand on these, when they stand on these foundations, the streams of conceiving do not flow. When the streams of conceiving do not flow, they're called a sage at peace. In Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, he's referring to the tides of conceiving. So like the ocean has got the high tide and the low tide. So the high tide is like a swelling up of a superiority complex, and the low tide is the bottom of an inferiority complex. So those tides which have to do with self-conceit are not swelling up and receding anymore. Then they're called a sage at peace. These all are forms of conceiving. Conceiving I am, conceiving I will be, I will not be, I will have form, I will be formless, I will be percipient, I will be non-percipient, I will be neither percipient nor non-percipient. This is all with I. This is there's probably a song that goes like that, like I, me, I. This is what we're doing all the time. This is what conceiving is. The Buddha said conceiving is a disease, a boil, a dart. Having gone beyond all conceiving, one is called a sage at peace. The sage at peace is not reborn, does not grow old, and does not die. They are not shaken, they do not yearn. They have nothing which would cause them to be reborn. Not being reborn, how could they grow old? Not growing old, how could they die? Not dying, how could they be shaken? How not being shaken, for what could they yearn? Wherever they stand, the streams of conceiving do not flow. They're the sage at peace. And then he turns again to Pukusati and says, Mendicant, you should remember this brief analysis of the 6 elements. In the meantime, Pukusati has gradually realized that the one that he was seeking for is the very person who's in front of him now. The fully awakened one has got. So he got up, arranged his robe, bowed to the Buddha, and apologized. I was foolish and stupid and unskillful because I called the Buddha as avuso, or friend. That's the kind of address you use for someone who's equal to you. Please accept my mistake. And he requests to be ordained. And the Buddha advises him that in order to be ordained, he needs to have a bowl and robes. And Pukusati goes out to obtain the bowl and robes, but while he's looking for his bowl and robes, he encounters a mad cow and is killed by the cow. But the Buddha, when questioned later on, he said that Pukusati was astute. He practiced in line with the teachings. He did not trouble me about the teachings. With the end of the 5 lower fetters, he's been reborn spontaneously. this would be as a non-returner. He will be extinguished there, not liable to return from that world. So this is the 4 resolutions of the Buddha. And I advise there are things in our life that we don't yet know how to let go of. You know, I didn't know how to let go of my greedy, pleasure-seeking temperament. Whenever something comes along which is pretty and nice, I like it so much. You know, this is my problem, is how to become disenchanted with things that are fun and pleasant. Other people have the need, they want to become disenchanted with things that are irritating and unpleasant. Other people, want to become released from many different kinds of bad habits. But according to the Sutta, there is a kind of a general solution. We make the effort, specifically when we recognize in ourselves that we've got a bad habit that we still have not yet let go of. Then from that we know the nature of dukkha, is we don't know how to let go. And we got to investigate that until we find out how to let go of that. And this general method is a good basic practice for letting go that should support any particular kind of resolution that we may like to undertake. It's amazing, isn't it, to be able to speak about the most profound sutta in the entire canon, just about. This is it's very unique, really profound sutta. And I did give some thought about how to compress it to enable you to kind of have the outline of it. And then if you circle back again and again and reflect and study about parts of that sutta, you won't get lost in the elements of the sutta. Now I welcome your questions, starting with Ren.
Thank you, Aya. I was thinking about the description of Nibbana, where there's no rebirth, there's no death, and no growing old, right? And I was also thinking about how when the Buddha, according to history, I guess, story of the history, but that he decided to continue to teach after reaching enlightenment, and he lived to an old age and he physically died. So then I'm thinking, okay, so the description of nirvana and must be something that's beyond what other people perceive, with the physical thing that the Buddha did grow old and die. So is it something metaphysical? I'm like, it might not be something that I can ever grasp, but I'm like trying to compare the description with what I know. What is that? What is that then with Nibbana? What is that state?
Thank you. That's a really good point. Thank you for raising that, and I could have been more clear. In the Pali, it's referring to the parinibbana. It's referring to nibbute, which is extinguishing, and then it's referring to parinibbana. So when one becomes enlightened, all of the grasping and attachment is extinguished and finished. Then at the end of the lifetime, when one comes to the last feeling, the last moment of feeling, the last breath, then that accumulated karma that was left over before is finished, and we come to the parinibbana. And then after that, there will be no rebirth, no growing old, and no dying. So becoming a fully enlightened arahant in this world, as long as we stay in this world, we've got one more old age and one more death, and many more moments of occupying the physical body to be experienced.
Thank you. And could you repeat the sutta you just
Yes,
transferred to me?
um, it's Majjhima Nikaya 140. Exposition of the elements. And then in Pali, it's called Dhatu Vibhanga. Dhatu means element, and Vibhanga means an exposition.
Yeah,
Thank
you do have the link listed in this week's list of what you're going to cover. So you can just go to that page and it'll take you to the Sutta Central link.
Right, if you're getting the announcements.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're on our mailing list, Ron. I've got to check and make sure that you're getting the announcements every week. I will register you.
Yeah, I don't think I am. I sent you an email about it.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Damon, what is your comment?
I don't have mine is a question, but I had sort of the same question as Ren, and I feel like frankly, I feel like it's kind of a dodging the question because she asked whether this is a real thing or metaphysical. And I think it based on the sutta that we just studied, it remains a very kind of mysterious metaphysical description. And so I have the same question as Ren, but I think the answer is that this is really metaphysics.
You raise a very excellent point, and the scholars of Buddhism have, in a way, you could think it's a slippery shortcut, or you could take it on faith as being the truth. The Buddha said, I directly experienced the knowledge of rebirth of my own many previous lifetimes, and seeing I have known directly through my direct experience how beings are born and reborn according to their karma. So he is claiming that as something that can be known directly. Even in his own time, the Buddha acknowledged that some people are able to have that as a direct knowledge, and a lot of people are not able to have that as a direct knowledge. It's like a faculty of insight. In our modern times, because of the culture that we live in, it's very unusual for anybody to have the direct knowledge of rebirth and past lifetimes. The vast majority of people cannot come anywhere close to that as their direct experience, and therefore it seems just like something metaphysical, something that is not able to be known directly. But Buddhism is depending on what can be experienced, and so can it be experienced at the moment of death that one knows with absolute certainty, this is my last breath, it's extinguished right here, it's finished? Or could it be experienced, I've done what had to be done, there's no more coming to birth for me again? If that is still, if it's still not, go ahead, Damon.
So actually, I would never I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot here, but I feel like you have come closer than most of us here. And I would like you, if you wouldn't mind sharing, it would be very inspiring to hear what have the glimpses, actually, in your life you've talked a little bit about it at different times, but maybe one more story about where you really got a glimpse of this experience, deathlessness.
So the knowledge, the wisdom, is knowing the end of suffering. And I definitely know about the end of some suffering. I don't claim to know about the complete end of all suffering, but there are specific ways that I know that I suffered in the past, that my life was filled with psychological poison, that I voluntarily kept the poison with me, and I gave myself my own poison, and I thought it was medicine. And during those years, I suffered a lot. And then there have been multiple, since I encountered Buddhism, like these aha moments when a big piece of it dropped away, and I realized that it's not inevitable. I'm not trapped with that. It can be put down forever. And that's, I'm a faith follower, so I know that how effective this path of training and practice has been for me. And I don't know what I'm going to be able to accomplish in this lifetime. But as long as I stay on the path that's laid out and I don't give up and I don't turn away and go off on some sidetrack, then I feel that there's a chance. And whether it happens in this lifetime or whether it happens later, I don't know. And I don't actually care. I'm not really interested in, saying I'm going to make it before I die, I'm going to make it. I'm not really interested in that. I'm just interested in staying on the path.
Thank you so much. I'm so inspired. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to take Nikolai first and then Richard.
Thank you. I have a question. I've been thinking a lot about, so the point of the Buddhism, the final goal is realization of Nibbana through realization of dukkha, anicca, anatta, right? And I've been reading the Bhikkhu Bodhi's books, and what I got from there is there are many ways of realization of Nibbana through the practice of meditation or through contemplations. Then I had a question. Also, if one realizes Nibbana through contemplation, what's the point of them for that person of meditation practice? If he's, you know.
My sense of the variety of different pathways is that they all converge into the same place. It would be like a gem that has a lot of facets, and some people are able to get a hold of anicca, contemplation of anicca, and so because they're able to, they can start there, but then through that they will come to all of the other elements of the teaching. Now, I don't think that it's possible to reach the goal without having some kind of a basic right view about causation, and without doing the basic groundwork with sila, establishing the intention of non-harming and the ethics that's following on that, and practicing the inner cultivation, including the developing the right effort to let go of the negative states of mind, developing mindfulness, and developing samadhi. All of those things are given in the Eightfold Path, and I believe it's necessary to have all of them. The one practice that seems to be optional are those immaterial meditations. which are very frequently mentioned as being part of enlightenment, but they're not included in the Eightfold Noble Path, and they're sometimes mentioned as being sort of optional. There's a lot of discussion about whether somebody can become enlightened without sama samadhi or without the jhana experience. And I think that the people who in the suttas developed enlightenment apparently without having that jhana meditation, sama samadhi. Well, for one thing, they were in the presence of the Buddha. That's a big help. And for another thing, they may have had a lot of like perfections developed in the past lives. So they must have had a lot of supporting factors that made it possible just in that moment to have the awakening of that wisdom. But for the average person, if you want to take the easier, more obvious path, then you should include meditation in your practice, because it's difficult to do it without meditation. And in hundreds of different places, the Buddha has recommended there's no wisdom without meditation, no meditation without wisdom. One who has both meditation and wisdom is close to peace and awakening. Yeah. Now, Richard.
Thank you, Raya. Continuing on with this idea about these four formless states, sometimes there's a misconception and they're called four formless jhanas. They're not formless jhanas, they're deepening of the fourth jhana. Just like it says, when you reach equanimity, right? In the example, it's like purifying gold, and you can do different things with it, and you can make different ornaments. So in going deeper and deeper into these formless states, eventually you get to the fifth formless state, allowing you to have complete control of your mind at that point. And that's why that's called Cheto Vimukti. The mind is liberated. Okay, you've gotten complete. You may not attain Hana Vimukti at that point, or you may attain it, but at least you've gotten complete mastery of your mind. And equanimity is completely perfected. But in understanding these, the first one, a lot of times it's translated as infinite, but it really means boundless, because you've gone beyond the boundaries of the body and the four elements, and you've entered into just space, and yet your cognition keeps going. And then you realize, hey, my cognition is still going, and that's the next one, and that's boundless. You're still cognizant, even though you're not involved with the four elements anymore, the lower four elements that make up rupa. And then going beyond that, it's translated as nothingness, but it doesn't really mean nothingness. It means to be unstuck. You've gone beyond the six elements now. You're no longer bound in any way into those six elements. And at that point, you think, well, maybe if I turned my perception inward, because at that point you're still kind of in and out in perception, even though you don't have any elements or anything attached to it anymore. They think, well, maybe if I turn my perception inward, so you get to neither perception nor non-perception, because you're no longer doing outward perception, but you're still doing a type of very, very subtle inward perception. And then if you think, well, what if I go beyond perception altogether? And that's that fifth state, right? Cessation of sense perception, right? You just shut down all sense perception, internal or external. And the only thing you might be aware of is slight flickering in the mind, which is sankharas arising. And that's why if you get to the point where you get complete control of your sankhara and you realize that everything really is a sankhara, right? And you stop that process, that's panavimukti. You've developed full understanding, full, they like to translate it as wisdom, but I prefer the word understanding because it's clearer in English. Wisdom has a connotation like the wisdom of Solomon, like God gave you some special gift or something. It's not like that at all. So understanding makes it clear. Okay, I have total clear understanding now at this point. So although it's not necessary to do those things because you've reached equanimity with master of the fourth jhana, from that point you can actually kind of leapfrog and go to panavimukti, right? Liberation by understanding. But these are all extra things, as well as at this point, that's when you can do the psychic powers, get the divine ear, get divine sight, and look at your past lives. Reaching the fourth jhana, you look at your past lives, see the birth and death of all beings, how everything's temporary. Any manifestation anywhere in the universe is just temporary, and you can master those things if you want. But that's why Buddha says when he reaches this state, he says, there's a certain sutra who says, and then he can go wherever he wants. In other words, you can, now you've developed complete equanimity and you've transcended, suffering. So now you can do whatever you want with your mind. You can go in any direction, but you won't get bound up again. You won't get caught up in anything. Anyways, that's my view. Maybe that might be helpful information for someone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard, and especially for others who are perhaps more beginners in meditation, especially. One aspect of this, which is important to know to keep yourself situated, it can happen sometimes in meditation that the experience of sense contact drops away and disappears. And if you don't know that that's possible, then you could become frightened by that, and then you could fall out of your meditation. But if you realize that it's possible to have a very peaceful meditation, which is apart from any experience coming through the senses, then you're able to stay. If that arises for you, then just don't do anything. Just stay there until the end of the meditation. And upon emerging from meditation, it's particularly useful to acknowledge the three marks. This is not me, not mine, not myself. That even experience of the being temporarily free from the sense contact is just a fabricated experience, or it's an experience that's the result of applying your mind in a certain way. Well, our timing is perfect because it's 2:30, and we've come to the wonderful conclusion of this great sutta. If you, again, my reminder, I had emailed out to you an email that had a picture of a Bodhi leaf within the email, and if you want to print out the Bodhi leaf with your computer and write down your resolution for the Vasa on the Bodhi leaf, then you can photograph it and send me a JPEG of your Bodhi leaf. Or if you know how to do this, if you're much better with technology than I am, you can somehow cause your resolution to go into that digital image and the digital image to come to me. And then we'll collect this is for our own inspiration, to have a sort of like a display of the people who are in the community with us and what are the practices that our friends are undertaking and working on together during this Vasa. So thank you everybody for your patient listening.
Thank you, Anna.
Sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu.
Thank you.
Sadhu.
To see everyone.
Thank you very much, Venerable.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Let's pay respect to the Triple Gem before we close off. Arahan Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Habiwadin Svakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangha Sangham Namah.
Thank you, Aya.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.